Well, hello guys. How are you doing today?
Great.
Excellent. How are you?
Can't complain. Can't complain. Happy that we're officially in the month of April.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful. Springtime's here.
A little Easter, little longer days coming.
Yep.
Doesn't hurt anybody. And we kind of have a big April, right?
A lot going on. Where are you headed?
That's a really great question. I kick off the month in Phoenix. I'm going to be a speaker at a surety bonding. So, Merchants Bonding has hired me to come out to do their agency company trip. So, Scottsdale, Arizona, for a little pampering and best practices. Then we kick off with Midwest Apex sales and Apex retention, which is incredibly exciting. Then I head out west to Cross Insurance, which is in Washington State. And then I kind of get prepped up because we're going to be doing a big speaking event early May to the Greenwich Group on branding. So, we got kind of a jam-packed April on my end, but I'm excited and looking forward to it. How about you, Scott? Where are you going?
Heading back out to Las Vegas for a Hawksoft user group meeting. So that's going to be great. I'm excited about that and looking forward to meeting up with some folks while I'm there and seeing some familiar faces. It'll be great.
Who doesn't love Vegas? And Dave, how about you?
I'm a little all over the country. I'm going. Actually, I'm even leaving the country. I should say I'm headed up to Canada to our friends up at Excalibur to continue their sales training up there. Headed to Kansas, Heartland, to do a agency assessment. Headed to Jersey, got a speaking engagement down with A&E, a big network down in the New Jersey area, doing a training on overcoming the price objection. Coincidentally, which, not to give you a little too much of a hint into our discussion today, but is our discussion topic for today as well. Got a little local traffic as well. And I'm taking a personal trip with the family up to Niagara Falls. We have April break up here. I know that's nobody else has that in the rest of the country, but up in New England, we like to just take a random week off in April.
Just like in February. No one else does that February break either.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's like, well, I hear that there's a very big waterfall there, Dave. So I'm sure you're going to have fun.
I know. That's what we're going to go see, if we can try to find out where this big waterfall is at.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Are you going to go over in a barrel?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is
Or are you going to tightrope walk across it?
I'm probably have more luck going over in a barrel than I would trying to tightrope across.
If any of these things really do happen, we do need to get this up on social media, just to be clear.
Yes. And I'd like to make it known that that's not a work sponsored event, so that no workers' comp insurance becomes involved.
Good point. But
He
when
did
we
say
go axe
personal trip.
throwing,
He did say personal trip,
he
guys.
did say personal trip. But when we go axe throwing, that is a work sponsored event.
I know. We got to get on Nicole to book that.
That is true.
Deanna's coming out here in April, so we'll have to book it all together. And even though she's got a broken ankle, I'm sure she'd throw a good axe.
Throw an axe with a broken ankle.
That's not necessarily a New England thing either. It just happens to be a fun thing to do, throw axes.
Right. I know. Now it's open in Rhode Island, so we have local opportunities.
Yes.
So we're gathered here today to talk a little bit about overcoming objections. And we were talking before this podcast, and Scott had a great sort of approach. So, and I know Dave corrects me all the time. I've been so trained on the word objection. And whenever we do any scripts or content, Dave always edits it and says concerns. Because objection sounds so harsh, but concern sounds something easier. So, Scott, why don't you get us kicked off? What is your approach to handling objections / concerns?
Sure. I think it's great to kind of pre-plan for them, of course, not just with scripting, but just with thinking about, what's causing these things to come up in all of our minds whenever we object to anything in particular. But in this case, it reminds me of just presenting even the similarities in presenting new lines of business on a call that a customer didn't intend to talk about when they were calling in, let's just say. So in that case, I was recently speaking about this. When we're looking for new opportunities on a call, we want to raise a potential issue that the person's not thinking about. We want to inform them of the additional coverage, and then we want to offer it, and we want to make sure that we directly ask for it, and we don't just leave the ball in their court to consider it for, for weeks and get back to us when they want to. Well, I think with objections that come up, it's the same type of approach. We want them to see what we're offering for their benefit. We want them to get to a place of wanting it themselves and want to overcome the obstacle with us. So we might think of it similarly, embracing really the concern. We might think of empathizing with the individual. Yes, I understand. I feel that way too, or have felt that way too. But really embrace, inform them of the coverage, and then make sure again that we're offering it. Objections to me are always coming from a place of fear in the mind of the person that's listening and considering. So it could be a fear of who is this guy that I'm talking with, and do I really trust him yet? Have we built trust? Have we built rapport? It could be a fear of not necessarily seeing the benefit. It could be a fear of investing more time. They don't have that time immediately. It could be a fear of spending more money. So thinking about those things, I think, up front, and how we might overcome them by empathizing and embracing the obstacle with the client, and then really informing them of how we can overcome that obstacle together, and then offering them the opportunity again to overcome that obstacle together, and making sure we're point blank asking for the business.
Dave, what do you think about that?
I love the idea. So we all read The Lost Art of Closing the last year or so, and it really opened my eyes to this idea that the old school approach of overcoming objections was creating a very combative relationship between the salesperson and the consumer, right? It's like, you have an objection, I'm gonna fire back, and I'm gonna overcome that, and it's like me against you. Whereas this approach of empathy and embracing and resolving concerns, which is the term that we pulled out of The Lost Art of Closing, really really does put us on the same team. Like, okay, now I understand your concern. Let's work together to, like Scott said, overcome that obstacle. Because if I understand your concern, I can probably help you with it. Whereas, we get into that objections is like, is this a real objection, or are you just throwing something out because we've been trained in our society to fight salespeople when it comes to stuff that it might even be in our best interest. Whereas a concern is something that just says, here's my fear, and here's what I want to do. Here's where I need your help to overcome that fear.
Well, we always like to say, I know we've all learned a lot from some of the previous people we've had the pleasure of working with or doing business with. And one of those people once told me that you put your objection front and center in the sale. So by saying something like, you might be thinking that this is expensive, or, you may want to contact it. So it's like, almost like when you bring it up and you have a way to diffuse it in your mind, you pass that person passes that objection over. And I think in insurance, one of the things we miss a lot is a lot of objections in my mind are blow-offs. We're trained to be polite. Maybe they thought you were fine, but they're giving you I need to think about it. And you're thinking, so you're saying there's a chance.
1 in a million.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not really getting to a little place of what is the real cause of it. We just sort of pass it off like, absolutely, think about it. And I think oftentimes, and Dave, you remind me of this pretty routinely in a good way, of it's not how we want to buy, it's how the customer wants to buy. So, we all think in insurance, well, they have to see it. They want to see it in front of them. They want to be able to look at it. I can tell you today that if I put our insurance policy in front of my husband, he has no idea what he's looking at, gets overwhelmed and confused, and doesn't care. But if you get him on the phone, you explain it, and he likes you, he'll be like, that makes sense, let's do it.
Right.
And so, sometimes I think we put objections in front of people because we're scared of maybe diving a little bit deeper to their concern and finding out what it really is. Like we all want to be very surface level and polite, but sometimes in sales, you have to take that step to get a little deeper in a professional manner, but to get what you need.
And let's face it, nobody really wants to think about their insurance. So when they say, I want to think about it, that falls into that bucket of BS, right?
Right.
Versus the guy that says to you, I'm waiting on other quotes. Like, okay, thank you. Now, and again, Scott, to your point, this might be, well, now I've got a good relationship. I've built some trust. So the guy is being honest with me. Here's the reason why I'm not moving forward today versus, hey, I want to think about it. So now we have the real objection. Now we can embrace that. Now we can have the discussion with them on why they should be doing business with us, why they don't need to wait for the other quotes and all of that.
Right, exactly. By building that rapport throughout the process and slowing down and taking the time to listen, to really think through and cut through the objection, and to maybe even ask some clarifying questions about the objection to restate it, make sure we're really understanding what their true concern is.
Absolutely. And I think, another key that we kind of miss on the, objection front, concern front, is that these things come up in the absence of sharing value.
Hmm.
So you get a concern when they're not clear on the value of what's going on. And a lot of times, like, we've all done the secret shopper game, you just see that it's a transaction. It's the year your roof, how many cars, pit bull, trampoline, and there is no sense of I'm getting value from this relationship. And so concerns come up when there's the absence of value. And I think everyone's got to slow down to speed up on quoting insurance, and really add that value in. Tell people what an independent agent is. Tell them why they're best suited by working with you. If we just go right into the underwriting questions, we're missing so much and opening the door to all of those concerns.
Yeah, and I think right at the beginning is really when we need to figure out why they called us, and so that we have that information for later in the call when the objection comes up, because often the objection is not really tied to the reason they originally called. So if we know that, if we build that rapport and we know why they called and what they're looking for, then we can, as first of all, establish early on what are the rules. I call it the rules of the road, right? If I can do X, are you going to buy this policy? And I'm not saying, the classic like car salesman, like, what is it going to take to get you into this car today? I'm not saying that approach. I'm saying that if you call and you tell me you're concerned because you had a claim and you didn't realize that your old agent didn't have rental on it, for example, if that's your concern, that you don't think you have the right coverage when a claim happened, I know that that's the concern I need to solve. So if I make sure you have the right coverage and then you come back to me and say, well, the price is too high, now I know that you're just throwing up an objection for me to try to throw me off versus what your true objective was at the beginning, which was to attain the right coverage.
Hmm.
So getting that information early on allows us later to be able to lean back on that and use that to help you solve that concern.
Right, right.
So what
Really
are some
no to
oh,
those
sorry, go
hot
ahead.
buttons, right?
Right.
So, Dave, if you could help us all out here, because you were obviously a very gifted sales manager at, several New England based agencies.
Okay. Thank you.
And now you're here on the team. So impart the wisdom, because the one thing I think everyone hears all the time is this one objection / concern of the starts with P, ends with rice, the
Yeah.
price game.
The
So
only objection anyone really ever has when it comes to buying insurance, right?
right. If they give you the real one, right? So how can our loyal listeners out there embrace and overcome the price concern?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I always want to say is when I walk into an agency, one of the questions we often ask is, do customers only care about price? And the key word there is only. And 99 out of 100 agents will tell me they don't only care about price. Then we start doing the training. And then everyone says, well, all they care about is price. All they care about is price. They don't care about that coverage. They don't want to do that. It doesn't matter what I say. They didn't buy it because they got a low rate. We were too high. And it all kind of comes back to price. So this is when I have this conversation, I always say the first thing I want to do is take all of those people that really only care about price, put them in a bucket and not have a conversation on them. I know that there are people out there that only care about price, right? We're not talking about those people. It's a small minority. Don't allow that minority to drive your behavior. So let's agree on that. We're going to take the people that truly only care about price and put them off to the side. That leaves us with the people that are telling us that they only care about price, or in our head only care about price, but we actually want to have a different conversation with them. Scott mentioned the relationship. So the first thing we want to do is lean back on that relationship. If price is their objection, but we know it's really just a concern to be resolved, we can now lean on that relationship to be able to have a better conversation with them. if we do have a good relationship, then they are not seeing our value. So we can talk about what's the value in doing business with us, what's the value in doing business with the agency. And we should have those points bulleted out. We should know, we should have a script for what makes working with our agency important. And it's not that we've been here for 120 years and we have multiple carriers and we're involved in our community, because almost everyone can say that. We have to get more to the point of what do we do. So involvement in the community is great. So, but now talk about what you do in the community. What are the specific events that you do? Talk about services that may be outside the bounds of what other agents do. Like, do you do a proactive renewal call every year? What a great sales tool that is to say something along the lines of, the last time your agent did an annual review, did he talk to you about this coverage? Right? Now that's a service. Now you're explaining why you should do business with us. So we move them away from that price. And again, I would go back to what I said about asking them at the beginning why they're shopping, so that you can use that when they tell you price. So you can divert the conversation back to that. So you told me you were concerned about coverage. You know, I know that I'm not saving you enough, or I know I'm a little bit higher than what you're paying, but go back to those coverages. We've tripled your bodily injury coverage. You know, we've done this, we've done that. So to me, the conversation on price is going to happen. The client's going to bring it up. We've trained them. It's kind of our own fault. Our industry has trained them to care about price. So we need to be able to make sure that we're having a conversation on what we bring to the table that is separate from just that premium number that they want to latch onto at the bottom of the quote page.
Well, and let me chime in on that too, because Mr. Pirro has the same concern every single time our insurance renewal comes in. And it comes up probably once every 3 or 4 months. And he's like, we're paying too much for our insurance. And I just kind of laugh and I'm like, you have a race car. You know, but in his mind, being, you know, not an insurance person, he pays too much for his insurance. And so I stopped him and I said, what do you think you should pay every month to insure what we have? And he took a minute and he goes, $13. And I was like, you should go find that. And when you do, you let me know. And so sometimes the price objection has little to do with, I can't afford what you're giving me, but just, I don't want to pay it in general.
Right.
Right.
So you have to be really good about being the fact that, great news, everybody here feels like they're paying too much for insurance. I feel like I'm paying too much for insurance. Dave, are you paying too much for your insurance? Scott, are you paying too much for insurance? You know, so like there is a component of the price game that is just, I don't want to pay it. And
Right.
I never feel like I'm going to get a good enough deal on it, but I have to do it. So you got to work around it. And I think one of the ways that we can avoid the price objection too, Dave, is not emailing quotes, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Like
Yes.
we go down and we look at it and, you know, it might be a 6-month policy or they're used to a year, you know, like there's all sorts of things that can happen. So it's avoiding the emailing of the quote so you can deliver the price and hear the person's response immediately is huge.
And I say this facetiously, I'm not recommending anyone do this, but if you're going to email the quote, you might as well don't attach anything. Don't put anything in the body of the email. Just take the premium, put it in the subject line and hit send, because that is all that they're doing. They're not reading the email that took you 15 minutes to write. They're not looking at the coverages. They're not doing anything other than looking at the number.
When it comes to looking at the coverage that's been emailed to you and going through that on your own, I think most people are just scanning it if they're looking at it at all. And if they are scanning it and looking at coverages, there's a lot that they don't understand. And if someone happens to reduce the coverage and offer a better price, to Dave's point, they're just going to be focusing on the price. There's no one on a call with them explaining the value of that coverage and why that was chosen, which was hopefully coming out of the building rapport and gathering information that was happening in the valuable phone call prior. So you're right. It needs to be talked about. The agent is going to share that value, and just emailing the quote just focuses everything on price.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I've lost business before to people who said that, oh, I got a quote from someone else and they said I didn't need coverage that high, right? Oh, because I don't own anything, my bodily injury coverage doesn't have to be as high as you have it. Like, so they can get bad advice out there from licensed agents. So we have to make sure that, again, that's where we're showing our expertise and getting our trust, so that when they do look at that coverage, they say, well, why did that guy reduce the coverage? Like, we want them to question that, not be like, oh, hopefully he had a good reason. Now I'm paying less and I'll just go for it.
Don't you think too that, overcoming some of these objections too, is really about, painting a picture of that value? And one way to paint a picture of that value is to personalize it in a way that the customer can really picture. And if some of those personalizations come from your own life and your own insurance coverage and what you've learned, that's an important part of really building that trust and rapport, as well as explaining something very practically to them that they can picture and want to overcome themselves.
Yeah, real stories too. I always make the point, don't use hypotheticals. Don't say like, well, what if you were driving down the street and you hit, blah, 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 because then they're like, well, that hasn't happened. They have a hard time wrapping their head around it. Find real life examples, like you said. And if you don't have your own, go talk to the people in the agency, the people in the industry. Find some real stories when these particular coverages were used, whether it's an umbrella policy, a higher liability limits, so that you can actually tell a story as to something that really happened, not just hypothetically, here's why you might need the coverage.
Yeah. And why you added it yourself. I know that there's examples that we all have in our own life. Yeah, I did not have life insurance for a long time. And then I realized, what am I doing? I learned the value of it and added that myself.
Yeah. I literally bought my first umbrella policy so that I could say that.
Little investment in your sales career.
Exactly.
Let's talk about my favorite concern, which I think this is actually an objection. I don't think this is a concern, right? Which is
there is a difference.
I have to talk to my spouse. This one's a delicate one, right? Because you don't want to be in someone else's marriage.
Right.
I know personally, if I went home and told my husband he saved $1,000 on their insurance, like he'd be like ecstatic. There would be no, but if I came home and said, I want to talk to you about maybe should we do this? He'd be like, what? Just do it. Like, what are you talking about? So to me, the spouse thing is one of three things. It's a blow off. And, you need to be prepared to take that next step of, hey, insurance is really confusing. Why don't I hop on and we can talk to them about this together? Let me take this off your plate. One less thing for you to do. It's a benefit. Because honestly, if any of us explained insurance to my husband and he had to come home and tell it to me, God only knows what I would hear. It wouldn't be accurate. I can tell you that much.
Right.
Scott, if Lolita went to the insurance agent and came back and translated to you, do you think it would be the pristine version?
No, I want to carefully answer this because it has nothing to do with my wife's inability to explain things clearly. But you're absolutely right. It would not be the right way to.
It loses something in translation.
Absolutely, just a little something. It would be that way for me as well. And having both people on the phone, but don't you think so much of it is a blow off?
I do, because when, honestly, if you could call my husband and explain it so I don't have to, and you're taking that off my list of things to do, I'm ecstatic, right?
Right. My wife would just be happy that I did it and took care of it.
The other reason is that's like some marriages, they make those decisions and somebody does not make those decisions without the other party. And again, that there's no shame in that, but that's the person that's going to dive in and say, great, you can help us. You can help me out with this. Like we can do this together. So that's the person that's going to buy into needing to talk to the spouse. And then, there's the person who, again, they are waiting for another quote. They're not telling you. So it's like, they're either going to latch on to the fact that you're going to take something off their plate, or they're going to latch on to the idea that they're just telling you this to buy themselves more time, or basically be, I'm not interested. And I think it's really important that we understand that, which path they're really on, because the I'm not interested path means that they're never going to call you again and you're going to keep following up with them. And so you have to pivot into that.
Yeah, I agree. I also want to I always say, we can't put everyone into the same bucket, right? So when somebody says, I want to talk to my spouse, I have to think about it, I'm waiting on other quotes, whatever it is, we have to this is why it's so important to build that relationship and build that rapport so that you get to understand that person, so that you can start to determine, is this real? Because there are some people who just will never make that decision right then, right? I have to think about it. Isn't like I have to think about it. It's just, I need to sleep one night and then make a decision. So you need to make sure that you're not just saying, okay, when somebody says, I want to think about it, this is what I'm going to say 100% of the time. But having said that, I don't want people to use that as an excuse to not embrace and resolve the concern, because it's like, well, that's what they said. They told me they wanted me to email it to them. They told me they needed to think about it,
Mhm.
right? So you do have to react differently, but don't use that as an excuse to allow yourself off the hook when it comes to actually selling the policy.
No, I agree. I agree. And then I think the final one, and Scott, love to hear your opinion on this, is like that sort of indifference of, I'm going to think about it. I'm waiting on other quotes. It's a very kind of wishy-washy, non-direct concern, right?
Right.
It's, they're taking back the control and putting the ball in their court. And that's when, you have to take another step, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to ask ourselves in those situations. Did I not explain the value as well? And when I'm thinking of value, not just the value of the policy, but the value of being an independent agent, the value of what I bring to the table as an individual agent, the value of having what does it mean to have multiple carriers? And I hear a lot of that language too in some of the secret shopper calls, and think to myself, the average person is not really giving much thought to that. So unpack it for them, explain that there's I can save you a lot of time by looking at all of these particular options, all of these different carriers. I'm going to distill that down to 2 or 3 options for you and get specific so that I can save you time and you don't have to call and be wasting a lot of your week checking into a variety of options. That's one of the great benefits of being an independent agent, is that I get to do that work for you and take that off your plate. And we get to talk through all 3 of those options together, and then we can come up with the best solution for you, the one that's most valuable for you, and the best coverage at the most affordable price.
And I think on those, even if you can't get them to say yes right then and there, you always have to say, well, by when do you think you're going to have your decision by? So it kind of forces them into that next step where,
Yeah,
oh, by the end of the week. Great. Can I give you a call Friday morning?
After
exactly.
at 10 o'clock, right?
Yes.
We always talk about that. Set that exact time, because we talk about this all the time. If I say I'm going to get back to you by the end of the day, right, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, in my head, I think I have till 5 o'clock. I call you at 4:58. I met the deadline I established. But if I'm the consumer, it's 10 o'clock. Okay, I get back to work. At lunchtime, I'm like, that's weird. I haven't heard from them. Now it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I'm like, where is this guy? He told me he was going to get back to me by the end of the day. There's 2 different experiences. So if you do need to buy yourself time, tell me you're going to call them at 4:30. Like, if you do need to buy yourself the whole day, but definitely give them a specific time you're going to call them.
And then I think it also puts that onus back on the customer, like, oh, they're going to call me. I need to make a decision. Okay, let's just take this off my plate. I've had time to think about it. Like, you'll get people just by the fact that you're making it convenient for them to say yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you've set that expectation, but you've met it too. So now when you do call them at 4:30, you've built that trust further. You've shown that you're going to deliver on what you promised. And now they're like, well, he did that, and like you said, the convenience factor, like, all right, he called me at 4:30. I can be done with this. I don't have to think about it tonight. Call somebody else tomorrow. Like, worst kept secret in insurance, nobody wants to deal with their insurance.
Right.
So just take it off their plate, let them move on with their lives.
We certainly don't want them calling us back at the end of the week after they're done thinking about it. That would be
unless it's to say yes, and then we definitely then we're all systems go. But we're trying to wrap up our day.
Right. There are times where I've framed it even by saying, "Great, can we talk about that later this week?" Yes, we can. If they're really pushing, like David said, that they're not going to do it. And excellent. Is Thursday good for you? Thursday. Do you like morning or afternoon? Afternoon. How about 2 o'clock? And you know what? 3 is better for me. Excellent. You worked your way to the exact time, but I will never get off the phone unless I have an exact time. Even if I have to kind of politely slide into it that way, that's a way that, gives them some choice. We're kind of chatting back and forth about it, but we're setting a definite time, and they know I'm going to call them back then.
Well, and I think this leads us to what I'd like to propose as our next podcast topic. I'm putting everybody on the spot now.
Okay.
I think we could do a whole one on the breakup voicemail and email.
Okay.
Yeah, so I thought you were going another direction. I'm good with that because I love that. But I think there's another topic that ties to this a little bit too, which is avoiding the objection. So if there are things we can do at the beginning of the call to prevent this from even happening. So now I think we have our next 2 podcast topics.
Yeah, so you would be a very big surprise which one we pick for May.
Although if Dave does go over the falls in a barrel. That should be the topic.
Of course.
With the video included.
We'll do a montage to Dave.
Wait, I'm going to survive.
That's why we need to talk about it. In a
Such
Biden.
optimism. That is
Only
such
have me in the
optimism.
ground.
I don't think the success rate on that is high, and you may want to increase your life insurance.
Good point.
Well, I thank you guys for joining us today. And, stay tuned for our next podcast coming out in May, to be determined on which topic we pick. But Scott and Dave, thanks so much. And to our listening crew out there, thanks for being loyal listeners. And we'll catch you next month.